I'm Jessica, 26 years old, and at my sister Emily's wedding reception, my mother stood up to give what everyone expected to be a heartwarming toast. Instead, she raised her glass and announced, "To the daughter who finally made us proud by marrying well, unlike some people in this family who continue to disappoint us with their poor life choices." The entire reception fell silent as 150 guests realized she was publicly humiliating me on what was supposed to be my sister's special day. What my mother didn't know was that I had been secretly planning my own announcement that would completely overshadow Emily's wedding and expose the favoritism that had poisoned our family for years. Before we dive into this absolutely devastating story of public family humiliation and the perfect revenge that followed, I need your predictions. What do you think my secret announcement was that could overshadow a wedding? How do you think my family reacted when their golden child's perfect day was completely upstaged? Drop your thoughts in the comments and smash that like button because this story shows exactly what happens when parents push the scapegoat child too far. Subscribe because the way I turned the tables on my toxic family is pure genius. Growing up as the older sister in the Morrison family meant living in the shadow of Emily, who was born 18 months after me but somehow managed to claim the position of family favorite from the moment she could walk and talk. The favoritism wasn't subtle or gradual, it was blatant, consistent, and devastating to witness as the child who was perpetually compared to someone who could apparently do no wrong. Emily was everything my parents, Robert and Linda Morrison, had dreamed of in a daughter. She was naturally beautiful with blonde hair and blue eyes that photographed perfectly for family portraits. She was socially gifted, making friends easily and charming adults with her bubbly personality and infectious laugh. She excelled in activities that brought social recognition to our family: cheerleading, student council, beauty pageants that resulted in local newspaper coverage and community admiration. I, on the other hand, was the daughter who never quite measured up to their expectations or Emily's effortless success. I was brunette and bookish, more interested in reading and academic achievement than social activities and popularity contests. I was introverted and thoughtful, preferring deep conversations with a few close friends to the large social gatherings that Emily thrived in and that my parents valued as indicators of success and likability. The contrast between how my parents treated Emily and me was obvious to everyone who knew our family, including extended relatives, family friends, and neighbors who witnessed the differential treatment during holidays, celebrations, and everyday interactions. Emily's achievements were celebrated with elaborate parties, expensive gifts, and social media posts that showcased my parents' pride in their amazing daughter. My achievements were acknowledged with polite congratulations and expectations that I should continue working hard to reach Emily's level of success and social recognition. When Emily made honor roll, she received a car. When I made honor roll consistently for 3 years, I received a card and the suggestion that academic success was expected rather than exceptional. When Emily was elected homecoming queen, my parents threw a party and invited half the neighborhood. When I won a statewide academic competition, they attended the ceremony but mentioned afterward that they hoped I wouldn't become too focused on books to develop social skills and relationships. The financial inequality was equally obvious and hurtful. Emily's wardrobe consisted of designer clothes and expensive accessories that kept her looking fashionable and sophisticated. My clothes came from discount stores and were chosen for practicality rather than style, with the explanation that I was too focused on academics to care about fashion and didn't need expensive clothing to impress people. Emily's extracurricular activities were funded generously, with private coaching, equipment, and travel expenses that allowed her to participate in competitions and events that enhanced her reputation and social connections. My interests in debate team and academic clubs were supported minimally, with the suggestion that these activities were good for college applications but not particularly important for personal development or family pride. The pattern continued through high school and into our early adult years, with Emily's dating relationships receiving enthusiastic support and my romantic interests being met with skepticism and criticism that reflected my parents' assumptions about my ability to attract quality partners. "Emily has such good judgment about men," Mom would comment when discussing my sister's latest boyfriend. "She always chooses such successful, attractive boys who come from good families." Meanwhile, my dating life was subject to constant scrutiny and criticism, Jessica, I hope you're not settling for someone just because they're nice to you. You need to think about long-term compatibility and what kind of future you want to build." The double standard extended to career expectations and life goals, with Emily being encouraged to pursue whatever made her happy while I was pressured to choose practical fields that would ensure financial stability and social respectability. "Emily is so creative and talented, she could succeed in any field she chooses," Dad would say proudly when discussing her career options after college. "She has the personality and social skills to excel in business, entertainment, or any profession that involves working with people." My career ambitions were evaluated more critically. "Jessica, you need to be realistic about your strengths and limitations. Not everyone is cut out for highly competitive fields, so you should focus on stable careers where hard work and dedication are more important than charisma and natural talent." The most painful aspect of the favoritism was how it affected family celebrations and milestones, with Emily's accomplishments becoming family-wide celebrations while my achievements were treated as personal successes that didn't require broader recognition or support. Emily's college graduation was marked with a large party, expensive gifts, and a family vacation to celebrate her achievement. My graduate degree completion was acknowledged with a dinner at a chain restaurant and suggestions that I should be grateful for the education I had received and focus on finding stable employment. But what made the favoritism even more difficult to endure was Emily's complete acceptance and encouragement of the differential treatment. Rather than recognizing that our parents' favoritism was unfair to me, she seemed to view her privileged position as natural and deserved, and she often made comments that reinforced the family narrative about her superiority and my shortcomings. "Jessica has always been the serious, studious one," Emily would say when introducing me to her friends, using a tone that made academic focus sound like a personality flaw rather than an achievement. "I don't know how Jessica finds time for all that reading and studying," Emily would comment during family gatherings, implying that intellectual interests were somehow less valuable than her social activities and relationship focus. The wedding planning process had elevated Emily's already privileged status to almost mythical levels, with my parents treating her engagement and marriage as the culmination of everything they had hoped for in a daughter. Her fiancé, Michael, was exactly what they had always wanted for their special girl: handsome, successful, from a prominent family, and capable of providing the kind of lifestyle that would reflect well on the Morrisons' parenting and social standing. "We're so proud that Emily is marrying such a wonderful man," Mom would tell anyone who would listen. "Michael comes from such a good family, and he's going to take excellent care of our precious daughter." The wedding itself was being funded entirely by my parents, who had been saving for years to ensure that Emily's celebration would be elegant, expensive, and impressive to the 150 guests who would be attending. No expense was being spared for flowers, catering, venue, music, and all the details that would make Emily's wedding a social event that people would remember and discuss for years to come. Meanwhile, my own romantic relationship and future marriage prospects were barely acknowledged by my family, despite the fact that I had been in a committed relationship for 2 years with someone who shared my values and supported my goals in ways that created genuine happiness and partnership. The contrast between Emily's wedding celebration and my family's indifference to my own relationship status would soon become the catalyst for a confrontation that would expose the depth of their favoritism and force them to confront the consequences of treating their children so differently. Emily's engagement to Michael Thompson had been the social event of the season in our small city, with my parents treating the announcement as validation of their successful parenting and evidence that they had raised a daughter who could attract the right kind of man from an established family with wealth and social connections. The engagement party they threw for Emily was elaborate and expensive, held at the country club where my father was a member and featuring catering, flowers, and entertainment that cost more than many people's annual salaries. The guest list included prominent local families, business associates, and social contacts who would be impressed by the celebration and the quality of Emily's choice in a future husband. "This engagement represents everything we've always hoped for Emily," Mom had announced to the assembled guests during her toast at the engagement party. "She's found a man who appreciates her beauty, her charm, and her wonderful personality, and who can provide her with the kind of life she deserves." The wedding planning process that followed was equally elaborate and centered entirely around ensuring that Emily's celebration would be perfect in every detail. My parents had hired the most expensive wedding planner in the area, booked the most prestigious venue, and committed to expenses that would create exactly the kind of sophisticated, impressive event that would enhance their family's social reputation. But what made the planning process particularly difficult for me was how completely I was excluded from meaningful participation despite being the maid of honor, a role I had accepted out of family obligation rather than genuine excitement about celebrating Emily's marriage. My opinions about dress choices, venue decisions, menu selections, and other wedding details were rarely sought and frequently dismissed when offered. The planning meetings I attended felt like elaborate consultations between Emily, my parents, and the wedding professionals, with my presence being more ceremonial than functional. "Jessica, you don't really understand fashion and social events the way Emily does," Mom had explained when I suggested that some of the dress options seemed impractical and overpriced. "Emily has such good taste and natural instincts about what will create the right impression for this kind of celebration." The maid of honor duties I was assigned were largely logistical and behind the scenes rather than visible or meaningful, reflecting my parents' assumption that my role should be supportive rather than prominent during Emily's big day. Meanwhile, Emily's friends who were serving as bridesmaids were consulted extensively about their preferences, included in decision-making processes, and treated as important contributors to the wedding planning rather than obligatory family members whose participation was expected but not valued. "Emily's friends have such great ideas about fun activities and social details," Dad had commented during one of the planning meetings. "They understand what young people want at weddings and how to create celebrations that people will remember and talk about." The contrast between how Emily's friends were treated and how I was regarded during the planning process was obvious and hurtful, highlighting the family dynamic that had characterized our relationships throughout our lives. But the most painful aspect of the wedding planning was discovering how my parents discussed my own romantic relationship and future marriage prospects during conversations they thought I couldn't hear or wouldn't understand. "At least we won't have to worry about Jessica's wedding being as expensive as Emily's," Mom had confided to my aunt during one family gathering. "Jessica's boyfriend seems nice enough, but he's not the kind of man who would require or expect the kind of elaborate celebration that Michael and Emily deserve." The comment revealed that my parents had already decided that my relationship and potential marriage were less important and deserving of investment than Emily's, based on their assessment of my boyfriend's social status and financial prospects rather than the quality of our relationship or compatibility. "Jessica has always been more practical and less focused on social events anyway," Dad had added during the same conversation. "She'll probably be happy with something simple and small when the time comes." Their assumptions about my preferences and values were based more on their perceptions of what I deserved rather than any actual conversations about what would make me happy or what kind of celebration I might want for my own marriage. The financial disparity was equally telling, with my parents spending approximately $75,000 on Emily's wedding while making comments that suggested my own future wedding would be funded on a much smaller budget that reflected their assessment of my relationship's importance and social significance. "We're so grateful that we can give Emily the wedding of her dreams," Mom had said during one of her conversations with wedding vendors. "Every girl deserves to feel like a princess on her wedding day, and Emily has always been our little princess who deserves the very best of everything." The implication that I was not deserving of similar investment or celebration was clear, even though it was never stated directly. My parents' financial priorities reflected their emotional priorities, with Emily's happiness and social success being worth significant sacrifice while my contentment was expected to be achievable through more modest means. But what my parents didn't know was that their assumptions about my relationship, my future, and my worth were about to be challenged in ways that would completely transform our family dynamics and force them to confront the consequences of their favoritism. The announcement I had been secretly planning would not only overshadow Emily's wedding celebration but would also expose the depth of their misjudgment about my life achievements and future prospects in ways that would be both shocking and permanently embarrassing for their family narrative. As Emily's wedding day approached and my parents became increasingly focused on ensuring that every detail would be perfect for their special daughter, I was preparing for a revelation that would demonstrate exactly how wrong they had been about which daughter was actually achieving the most impressive success and building the most envious future. Emily's wedding day dawned perfect and clear, with the kind of sunny weather that photographers love and that seemed to validate my parents' belief that everything about their golden daughter's celebration was destined to be flawless and memorable for all the right reasons. The ceremony at St. Mark's Cathedral was elegant and impressive, with 150 guests witnessing Emily's marriage to Michael in a setting that showcased both families' social status and financial resources. Emily looked beautiful in her custom designer gown, and Michael was handsome and charming as they exchanged vows that promised a future filled with love, prosperity, and social success. I performed my maid of honor duties competently but without the enthusiasm that everyone seemed to expect, holding Emily's bouquet, managing her train, and smiling for photographs while internally preparing for the evening's events that would change everything about our family's dynamics and assumptions. The reception at the Grandview Country Club was everything my parents had planned and paid for: elegant, expensive, and designed to impress the assembled guests with the Morrison family's sophisticated taste and generous resources. The ballroom was decorated with imported flowers, crystal chandeliers provided romantic lighting, and a live orchestra played music that created exactly the kind of refined atmosphere my parents had envisioned. The dinner service proceeded smoothly, with guests enjoying the premium cuisine and wine that had been selected to demonstrate the family's commitment to providing their daughter with a truly special celebration. Conversations throughout the reception focused on complimenting Emily's beauty, praising the elegance of the event, and expressing admiration for the obvious love and financial investment her parents had devoted to making her wedding day perfect. But the moment that would define the evening and permanently alter our family relationships came when it was time for the traditional toasts from the parents of the bride and groom. Michael's parents spoke first, offering warm and gracious remarks about welcoming Emily into their family and expressing confidence that she and Michael would build a wonderful life together based on shared values and genuine affection. Their toast was heartfelt, appropriate, and focused on celebrating the couple rather than making broader statements about family dynamics or personal achievements. Then it was my parents' turn to address the assembled guests, and I watched with growing apprehension as both Mom and Dad stood up with their champagne glasses, clearly planning to deliver remarks they had prepared and rehearsed for this moment. Dad spoke first, offering conventional congratulations to Emily and Michael while emphasizing the pride he felt in his daughter's choice of husband and the kind of future they would build together. His remarks were predictable and appropriate, focusing on Emily's qualities and the happiness her marriage brought to the entire family. But then Mom stood up with her glass raised, and what followed was a toast that seemed designed to humiliate me publicly while celebrating Emily in ways that explicitly contrasted our different life paths and family value. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to propose a toast to my daughter Emily," Mom began, her voice carrying the kind of emotional intensity that suggested she had been planning these remarks carefully and intended them to make a lasting impression. "Emily has always been the daughter who made us proud, who brought joy and success to our family, and who made choices that reflected the values and standards we tried to instill in both our children." The phrase "both our children" was delivered with a glance in my direction that made it clear her comments were intended as much to criticize me as to praise Emily, and I could feel the attention of 150 wedding guests beginning to focus on what was becoming an uncomfortable public comparison. Tonight we celebrate a daughter who chose wisely in love, who attracted a wonderful man from a good family, and who is building the kind of life that every parent hopes their child will achieve. The emphasis on Emily's wise choices and successful attraction of a quality husband was clearly intended as implicit criticism of my own relationship choices and romantic prospects, delivered in front of an audience that included family, friends, and social contacts who would remember and discuss these remarks long after the wedding was over. But then Mom delivered the line that would haunt our family relationships permanently: "To the daughter who finally made us proud by marrying well, unlike some people in this family who continue to disappoint us with their poor life choices." The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable, with guests clearly recognizing that they had just witnessed a mother publicly humiliate one daughter while celebrating another at what was supposed to be a joyful family occasion. I could feel every eye in the ballroom turning toward me as people processed what they had just heard and tried to understand why a mother would use her daughter's wedding reception as an opportunity to express such cruel disapproval of another family member. Emily's reaction was particularly telling. Instead of looking embarrassed or uncomfortable about her mother's inappropriate comments, she was smiling and nodding as if she agreed with the assessment and appreciated having her superiority acknowledged so publicly. Michael looked uncomfortable but remained silent, apparently unwilling to challenge his new mother-in-law's remarks on his wedding day, even though they were obviously hurtful and inappropriate for the occasion. Several guests at my table looked shocked and sympathetic, clearly recognizing that I had been unjustly attacked during what should have been a celebration of family unity and love. I could see people whispering and exchanging glances that suggested Mom's toast had crossed a line that made everyone present uncomfortable. But what my mother didn't know was that her humiliating toast had just provided the perfect setup for the announcement I had been planning, and that her public criticism of my life choices was about to be revealed as spectacularly misjudged and embarrassingly premature. As I stood up from my seat and walked toward the microphone that had been used for the earlier toasts, I felt a mixture of nervousness and satisfaction about what I was preparing to reveal to the assembled wedding guests. The announcement I was about to make would not only vindicate my life choices and demonstrate my parents' poor judgment, but it would also permanently overshadow Emily's wedding celebration and ensure that this reception would be remembered for reasons my family had never intended or anticipated. As I approached the microphone, still feeling the sting of my mother's public humiliation, I could see confusion and concern on the faces of the wedding guests who were clearly wondering what I planned to say in response to such an inappropriate and hurtful toast. Emily looked nervous for the first time all evening, apparently sensing that something significant was about to happen but uncertain about what I might reveal or how it would affect her perfect wedding celebration. My parents were watching me with expressions that suggested they were worried I might create a scene or respond emotionally to Mom's comments in ways that would embarrass the family and disrupt the elegant atmosphere they had worked so hard to create. But what none of them knew was that I had been planning this moment for weeks, waiting for the right opportunity to share news that would completely transform their understanding of my achievements and prospects while demonstrating how wrong their assumptions about my life had been. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," I began, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil I was feeling after my mother's devastating toast. "I know this is Emily and Michael's special day, and I want to honor that by sharing some wonderful news that I hope will add to the celebration." I paused to let the anticipation build while also giving myself a moment to appreciate the irony of what I was about to reveal in the immediate aftermath of being publicly criticized for my poor life choices and disappointing achievements. 3 weeks ago, I received some news that I'd been keeping private while Emily's wedding planning was finalized, but I think tonight is the perfect time to share it with our family and friends. The room was completely quiet now, with every guest focused on what I was about to announce. I could see my parents exchanging worried glances, clearly wondering what kind of news I could have that would be appropriate to share at Emily's wedding reception. I need to pause here because what I'm about to reveal was so perfectly timed and so completely shocking that it literally changed the entire dynamic of that wedding reception. You're probably wondering what news could be so incredible that it would overshadow a wedding, but trust me, what I announced was so amazing that even my golden child sister couldn't compete with it. Subscribe because the way I turned my mother's cruel toast into the most satisfying moment of my life is absolutely brilliant. I've been accepted to Harvard Medical School with a full scholarship, and I've also been offered a position in a prestigious research program that will allow me to begin my career while completing my education. The reaction was immediate and electric. Gasps of amazement and congratulations began rippling through the reception hall as guests processed the magnitude of what I had just announced. Harvard Medical School was one of the most prestigious and competitive programs in the world, and receiving a full scholarship represented an achievement that very few people could claim. But I wasn't finished with my announcement. Additionally, the research position comes with a starting salary of $150,000 per year, which will increase substantially upon completion of my medical degree and residency program. The financial details added another layer of shock to my revelation, as guests began to understand that I would be earning significantly more than most of the successful professionals in attendance, including Michael and many of their prominent family friends. Finally, I wanted to share that my boyfriend David, whom my parents have met but perhaps underestimated, has just been promoted to senior partner at Goldman Sachs, making him one of the youngest partners in the firm's history. The complete picture was now clear to everyone in the ballroom. The daughter who had just been publicly criticized for poor life choices and disappointing achievements was actually accomplishing things that exceeded the success of everyone else in the family, including the golden child bride who was supposed to be the evening star. The silence that followed my announcement was different from the uncomfortable quiet that had greeted my mother's cruel toast. This was stunned amazement as 150 wedding guests processed information that completely contradicted everything they had just heard about my supposed failures and disappointing prospects. Emily's face had gone completely pale as she realized that her perfect wedding day had just been overshadowed by achievements that made her marriage to a successful local businessman seem modest by comparison. My parents looked shocked and confused, clearly struggling to reconcile their long-held assumptions about my mediocrity with news that positioned me as the most accomplished member of our entire family. But the most satisfying moment came when I looked directly at my mother and delivered the final part of my response to her humiliating toast. "Mom, thank you for that touching tribute to Emily's achievements. I hope that someday I'll also be able to make choices that earn your approval and recognition. Though I have to admit that attending Harvard Medical School while earning more money than anyone else in our family feels like a pretty good start." The gentle sarcasm and direct reference to her earlier criticism made it impossible for anyone to miss the irony of the situation or the complete reversal of family fortunes that my announcement had revealed. The applause that followed was enthusiastic and sustained, with guests clearly appreciating both my achievements and my gracious but pointed response to my mother's inappropriate comments. Several people stood up to offer congratulations, and I could see family friends approaching my table to express amazement about news they had never heard before. "Jessica, why didn't you tell us about Harvard?" my aunt asked, her voice carrying both excitement about my success and confusion about why such incredible news had been kept secret. "I wanted to wait until after Emily's wedding was over so it wouldn't interfere with her celebration," I replied diplomatically, though everyone understood that my timing had actually been perfect for responding to my mother's public attack. As the reception continued and guests circulated throughout the ballroom, the conversations I overheard made it clear that my announcement had completely shifted the evening's focus from Emily's wedding to my unexpected achievements and the obvious family favoritism that my mother's toast had revealed. "Can you believe Jessica got into Harvard Medical School?" I heard one guest say to another. "And her mother just criticized her life choices in front of everyone. How embarrassing. That poor girl has been hiding incredible success while her parents treated her sister like she was the only one accomplishing anything," another guest observed. "No wonder she waited until tonight to share such amazing news." The vindication was complete and satisfying, but it was also tinged with sadness about the family relationships that had been damaged by years of favoritism and would be difficult to repair even with this dramatic revelation of my actual achievements and prospects. Emily's perfect wedding day had become the setting for a family reckoning that exposed truths about favoritism, misjudgment, and conditional love that would change our relationships permanently. The remainder of Emily's wedding reception was dominated by conversations about my Harvard announcement and the obvious family dynamics that my mother's toast had revealed to everyone present. What should have been an evening focused on celebrating Emily and Michael's marriage had become a social gathering where guests were discussing favoritism, misjudgment, and the dramatic reversal of family fortunes they had just witnessed. My parents spent the rest of the evening trying to manage the social embarrassment of having publicly criticized a daughter who had just revealed achievements that exceeded anything Emily or Michael had accomplished. Their attempts at damage control were awkward and transparent, as they tried to claim they had always known about my success while explaining why they had never mentioned such impressive accomplishments to their social circle. "Of course, we're proud of Jessica's acceptance to Harvard," Mom told a group of family friends who had approached her with questions about my announcement. "We've always known she was capable of great things, and we're thrilled about her opportunities." But the contradiction between her private knowledge of my success and her public humiliation of my life choices was obvious to everyone who had witnessed both her toast and my response. Her attempts to rewrite the narrative only highlighted how poorly she had handled the situation and how wrong her assumptions had been. Dad's approach was more focused on minimizing the significance of the family conflict while emphasizing his pride in both daughters' achievements, but his comments only drew more attention to the disparity in how Emily and I had been treated throughout our lives. Both our daughters have made us proud in different ways, Dad explained to guests who asked about the evening's dramatic turn of events. Emily has found wonderful happiness in marriage, and Jessica has achieved remarkable academic success. Every parent hopes their children will excel in their chosen paths. But the diplomatic language couldn't disguise the fact that only one daughter had been publicly celebrated while the other had been publicly criticized, and that the family's understanding of which daughter was more successful had been completely overturned in front of their entire social circle. Emily's reaction to my announcement was complex and revealed the depth of her investment in maintaining her position as the family's golden child. Instead of expressing genuine excitement about my achievements or embarrassment about our mother's inappropriate toast, she seemed more concerned about how my news was affecting her wedding day and the attention she had expected to receive. "Jessica, I wish you had told us about Harvard earlier so we could have celebrated your news properly instead of having it overshadow my wedding," Emily said during a private conversation later in the evening. "This was supposed to be my special day, and now everyone is talking about your announcement instead of my marriage." Her response revealed that she was more upset about losing the spotlight than pleased about my success, and that she had internalized our parents' favoritism to the extent that she viewed my achievements as threats to her own importance rather than reasons for sisterly celebration. Michael, meanwhile, was gracious and congratulatory about my news, though he was clearly uncomfortable about the family dynamics that had been exposed during what was supposed to be a joyful celebration of his marriage. "Jessica, congratulations on Harvard and the research position," Michael said when he had an opportunity to speak with me privately. "Those are incredible achievements, and I hope this evening's complications don't overshadow how proud you should be of your success." His diplomatic acknowledgement of the evening's complications was a tactful way of recognizing that our family's dysfunction had created an uncomfortable situation without directly criticizing his new in-laws during his own wedding reception. But the most significant conversations were with extended family members and family friends who approached me throughout the evening to express amazement about my achievements and concern about the family treatment I had apparently been enduring without their knowledge. "Jessica, I had no idea you were applying to medical school, let alone Harvard," my uncle said during one of these conversations. "Why haven't your parents been talking about such incredible accomplishments? If my daughter got into Harvard Medical School, I'd be telling everyone I met." "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry about your mother's toast," one of Mom's longtime friends confided. "That was inappropriate and hurtful, especially now that we know about your amazing success. I hope she realizes how wrong she was and makes things right with you." The support and validation from people who had witnessed the evening's events was emotionally overwhelming but also healing, as I realized that my mother's public attack had actually exposed her poor judgment to people whose opinions she valued and respected. The social consequences for my parents were immediate and would be lasting. They had publicly demonstrated poor parenting judgment, obvious favoritism, and cruel treatment of a daughter who was actually achieving remarkable success. Their reputation within their social circle was damaged in ways that would be difficult to repair, regardless of how they handled the situation moving forward. Several guests made comments to me that indicated they were reassessing their understanding of my family's dynamics based on what they had observed during the wedding reception. "I always wondered why your parents seemed to focus so much attention on Emily while barely mentioning your accomplishments," one family friend observed. Tonight's events certainly put a lot of things in perspective. As the evening concluded and guests began departing, it was clear that Emily's wedding would be remembered not for its elegance and sophistication, but for the family drama that had exposed years of favoritism and misjudgment in the most public way possible. The drive home with my parents was silent and tense, with none of us willing to address the elephant in the room about how the evening had unfolded and what it meant for our family relationships moving forward. But the conversation that would determine our future family dynamics was inevitable, and it would either result in genuine acknowledgement of the problems that had been exposed or further damage to relationships that had already been strained by years of differential treatment and conditional love. The reckoning was coming, and it would reveal whether my parents were capable of recognizing their mistakes and rebuilding relationships based on fairness and genuine love, or whether the favoritism and prejudice that had characterized our family would continue despite the dramatic evidence of their misjudgment. The conversation I had been both dreading and anticipating took place the following Sunday at my parents' house, when they called me for what they described as an important family discussion about the wedding reception events and their implications for our relationships moving forward. I arrived at their house prepared for either genuine reconciliation based on acknowledgement of their mistakes, or further defensive justification of their behavior that would confirm the permanence of our family dysfunction. What I found was a complex mixture of both approaches that revealed how difficult it was for them to confront years of favoritism and poor judgment. "Jessica, we need to talk about what happened at Emily's wedding," Dad began, his tone carrying the kind of seriousness that suggested they had spent considerable time discussing their approach to this conversation. "We're concerned that there may have been some misunderstandings about our feelings toward you and your achievements, and we want to clear the air about family relationships and communication." The phrase "misunderstandings about our feelings" was revealing because it suggested they were going to frame the situation as a communication problem rather than acknowledging the systematic favoritism and misjudgment that had actually created the conflict. Mom's approach was more emotional but equally defensive. "Sweetheart, we love you very much, and we've always been proud of your accomplishments. If our toast at Emily's wedding gave people the wrong impression about our feelings, we're sorry that happened." The conditional apology for giving people the wrong impression rather than for actually treating me poorly was typical of their approach to family conflicts, where they were more concerned about public perception than genuine acknowledgement of harmful behavior. "Mom, Dad, this isn't about giving people the wrong impression," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm despite the frustration I was feeling about their refusal to acknowledge the real issues. "This is about 26 years of treating Emily like she was the only daughter worth celebrating while treating my achievements as less important, less worthy of investment, and less deserving of recognition." I continued with specific examples that documented the pattern of differential treatment they were trying to minimize. "Emily's honor roll achievements earned her a car. Mine earned me a card. Emily's college graduation was celebrated with a party and vacation. Mine was acknowledged with dinner at a chain restaurant. Emily's engagement was announced with elaborate parties and social media celebrations. My 2-year relationship has barely been acknowledged." The specificity of my examples made it difficult for them to dismiss my concerns as oversensitivity or misunderstanding, because the differential treatment had been obvious and consistent over decades of family interactions. Dad's response revealed his continued inability to recognize the favoritism that had characterized their parenting. "Jessica, we've always tried to treat you and Emily fairly, but you have different personalities and different needs that required different approaches to support and encouragement." "Different needs?" I repeated. "Dad, Emily needed a car to celebrate making honor roll, but I didn't need recognition for making honor roll consistently for 3 years. Emily needed expensive parties to celebrate her achievements, but I needed practical dinners to acknowledge mine." Mom attempted to explain their reasoning, but her justifications only highlighted how wrong their assumptions about our respective worth and potential had been. "Emily has always been more social and outgoing, so we thought public recognition and celebration were more important for her personality and development. And Jessica has always been more academic and self-motivated, so we assumed she didn't need as much external validation and support," Dad added, apparently not recognizing that their assumptions had resulted in one daughter receiving abundant love and investment while the other was expected to be content with minimal attention and resources. The conversation continued for 2 hours, during which I systematically addressed every example of favoritism I could remember while my parents alternated between defensive justification and grudging acknowledgement that their approach to parenting had perhaps been less equitable than they had intended. But the breakthrough moment came when I addressed the core issue that had been driving their favoritism, and that was revealed so clearly by Mom's wedding toast. "The real problem isn't just that you treated Emily and me differently," I said. "The problem is that you treated Emily better because you thought she was more valuable, more worthy of investment, and more likely to reflect well on your parenting and social status. Last night, Mom stood up at Emily's wedding and publicly criticized my life choices while praising Emily for finally making you proud. That wasn't a miscommunication or a misunderstanding, that was you revealing your true feelings about your daughter's relative worth and achievements. The directness of my assessment created a moment of silence that suggested they were finally beginning to understand the depth of damage their favoritism had caused and the accuracy of my interpretation of their attitudes and behavior. Mom's response was the first genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing that I had heard from either parent. "Jessica, you're right that my toast was inappropriate and hurtful. I was caught up in celebrating Emily's happiness, and I said things that were cruel and unfair to you. But more than that," she continued, her voice breaking with emotion, "I think we've been wrong about a lot of things regarding how we've treated you compared to Emily, and I'm sorry for the pain we've caused." Dad's acknowledgement was more analytical but equally significant. "Jessica, I'm beginning to understand that our assumptions about your needs and Emily's needs were based more on our preconceptions than on actual observation of who you were and what you were achieving. We thought Emily needed more support and attention because she seemed more fragile and social, but we failed to recognize that you needed equal recognition and investment even though you were more independent and self-motivated." The conversation that followed was emotional and painful for everyone involved, as we worked through decades of accumulated hurt and resentment while also trying to identify ways to repair relationships that had been damaged by years of differential treatment. "I don't expect you to change the past or erase the favoritism that affected my entire childhood and young adulthood," I told them honestly. "But I need you to understand that your treatment of Emily and me wasn't just different, it was unfair in ways that communicated clear messages about who you valued more and who you believed was more worthy of your love and support. I also need you to understand that my success at Harvard and my relationship with David aren't surprises or sudden developments. I've been achieving remarkable things throughout my life, but you were so focused on Emily that you didn't notice or celebrate what I was accomplishing." Mom's response showed genuine recognition of how their favoritism had blinded them to my achievements. "Jessica, you're absolutely right. We've been so focused on Emily's social success and conventional achievements that we failed to recognize how extraordinary your academic accomplishments and personal development have been. Looking back, I can see that you've consistently exceeded Emily's achievements in objective measures like grades, scholarships, academic recognition, and now professional opportunities, but we were too caught up in traditional definitions of success to appreciate what you were doing." Dad added his own recognition of their misjudgment. "I think we assumed that because you were quieter and more studious, you were somehow less remarkable or less deserving of celebration than Emily, who was more outgoing and socially active. But last night's revelation about Harvard and your boyfriend's success at Goldman Sachs made it clear that we'd been completely wrong about which daughter was achieving more impressive things and building a more enviable future." The acknowledgement of their mistakes was gratifying and necessary, but it also raised questions about whether genuine change in family relationships was possible after so many years of established patterns and differential treatment. "I appreciate that you're recognizing these problems now," I told them. "But I need to know that any changes in how you treat Emily and me will be genuine and lasting, not just temporary adjustments based on embarrassment about being publicly wrong at the wedding. I also need to know that you understand the impact your favoritism has had on my relationship with Emily, who has internalized your messages about her superiority and my relative unimportance in ways that affect how she treats me as a sister." The conversation concluded with commitments from my parents to address their favoritism more consciously and to make efforts to celebrate my achievements with the same enthusiasm and investment they had always shown for Emily's successes. But the real test of whether our family dynamics could change would come in their actions over the following months and years, as they either demonstrated genuine commitment to treating their daughters equally or revealed that their promises were motivated more by social embarrassment than authentic recognition of their parenting mistakes. The reckoning had begun, but the healing would require sustained effort and genuine change from people who had spent decades justifying and defending behavior that had damaged one daughter while elevating another based on superficial preferences and social biases. 2 years after Emily's wedding reception disaster, the consequences of that evening's revelations had created lasting changes in our family relationships that were both healing and permanently transformative. The public exposure of my parents' favoritism and the dramatic revelation of my achievements had forced everyone to confront truths that had been ignored for decades. My parents had made genuine efforts to repair our relationship and address the favoritism that had characterized our family dynamics for so long. They had begun celebrating my achievements with the same enthusiasm and public recognition they had always given Emily's successes, including hosting a belated celebration for my Harvard acceptance that was attended by the same social circle who had witnessed my mother's humiliating toast. "We want to properly celebrate Jessica's incredible achievement," Mom had announced when sending invitations for the Harvard celebration party. "We're so proud of our daughter's acceptance to medical school and want to share this wonderful news with all our friends and family." The party itself was elegant and well attended, providing an opportunity for my parents to publicly demonstrate their pride in my accomplishments while also making amends for the poor judgment they had shown at Emily's wedding. But more importantly, their changed behavior extended to everyday interactions and family planning, with my relationship with David receiving the same recognition and support that Emily's marriage had always enjoyed. They had welcomed David into the family with genuine warmth, acknowledging his professional success and treating our relationship as seriously as they treated Emily and Michael's marriage. "David is such a wonderful addition to our family," Dad had told his business associates during a golf tournament where David was invited as his guest. Jessica found herself an incredibly successful and accomplished young man who shares her values and supports her medical career ambitions. The financial inequities that had characterized their treatment of Emily and me were also being addressed, with my parents contributing equally to both daughters' major life expenses and celebrations. When David and I became engaged 6 months after Emily's wedding, they funded our engagement party with the same generosity and enthusiasm they had shown for Emily's celebration. My Harvard Medical School education was supported with the same financial assistance they had provided for Emily's college expenses, and my parents had begun including my achievements in their social conversations with the same pride and frequency they had always shown when discussing Emily's successes. But perhaps the most significant change was in Emily's attitude toward our relationship and her recognition of the favoritism that had affected our family dynamics throughout our childhood. The shock of learning about my Harvard acceptance and David's Goldman Sachs partnership had forced her to confront the reality that her perceived superiority had been based more on parental favoritism than objective achievement. "Jessica, I owe you an apology for how I treated you during our growing up years," Emily had said during a private conversation we had several months after her wedding. "I think I internalized Mom and Dad's favoritism and used it to justify treating you like you were less important or less accomplished than I was. Looking back, I can see that you were consistently achieving more impressive things than I was, but I was getting all the recognition and celebration because of our parents' assumptions about social success and conventional achievements." Her acknowledgement of the family favoritism and its impact on our relationship was both healing and necessary for rebuilding the sisterly connection that had been damaged by years of differential treatment. The professional consequences of my Harvard Medical School attendance and research position had exceeded even my own expectations, with opportunities for specialization, research publication, and career advancement that positioned me for leadership roles in academic medicine and medical research. My relationship with David had deepened and strengthened, culminating in an engagement and wedding planning process that received enthusiastic support from both our families. David's promotion to senior partner at Goldman Sachs had continued his rapid career advancement, and together we were building exactly the kind of successful, intellectually stimulating partnership that represented genuine compatibility and shared values. But the most satisfying aspect of the long-term consequences was watching my parents learn to appreciate achievements based on substance rather than superficial social recognition. They had begun to understand that academic excellence, professional accomplishment, and intellectual partnerships were as worthy of celebration as traditional markers of success like beauty, social popularity, and conventional marriages. "We've learned so much about what real success looks like," Mom had reflected during one of our family dinners. "Jessica's path to Harvard and her relationship with David have shown us that there are many different ways to build meaningful, successful lives. We're grateful that Emily found happiness with Michael, but we're equally grateful that Jessica found her own path to achievement and fulfillment that we initially didn't understand or appreciate properly." The social consequences for my parents had been lasting but ultimately positive, as their willingness to acknowledge their mistakes and change their behavior had earned respect from friends and family members who had witnessed both their poor judgment and their efforts to make amends. Emily's marriage to Michael had continued successfully, but without the excessive parental attention and investment that had characterized the early stages of their relationship. Emily had been forced to develop her own identity and achievements independent of her status as the family's golden child, leading to personal growth and maturity that benefited her marriage and individual development. The wedding reception that was supposed to celebrate Emily's perfect marriage had instead become the catalyst for family healing and recognition of achievements that had been overlooked for far too long. My mother's cruel toast had backfired spectacularly, exposing her own poor judgment while creating the perfect opportunity for me to reveal accomplishments that vindicated every choice I had made despite family criticism. Looking back on that devastating wedding reception and the incredible journey that followed, I realize that sometimes the most painful moments create opportunities for the most meaningful growth and change. My mother's cruel toast was the worst thing she could have done to me as a daughter, but it was also the catalyst for family healing that couldn't have happened any other way. Have you ever been the scapegoat in a family that favored another sibling? How do you handle parents who consistently undervalue your achievements while celebrating others for less impressive accomplishments? I'd love to hear your stories about overcoming family favoritism and proving wrong people who underestimated you. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I share more stories about family dynamics, sibling favoritism, and the satisfaction of proving wrong people who counted you out. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss any new videos, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by family recognition. Thank you for watching and for all the incredible support you show by engaging with these videos. Remember that your achievements matter regardless of whether family members celebrate them, and sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply succeeding despite people's low expectations and cruel treatment. Take care of yourselves, trust your own worth even when family doesn't see it, and remember that the best response to public humiliation is private achievement that speaks louder than words. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, keep proving wrong everyone who underestimated what you were capable of accomplishing.